are lots of different issues around housing on Waiheke. A lot of the problems occur for people who are renting around October, November, December.
Waiheke's become incredibly desirable. It's a tourist destination. People want to come here for their holidays.
In the last 4 or 5 years, the number of available rentals has dropped dramatically. And I think it's one of the main reasons is because this being a holiday island, if you've got a half-decent place, you can make more in 2 or 3 months in the summer renting it to holidaymakers than you can make it all year round.
We do have a lot of houses on Waiheke that are not lived in year round. The people who own their houses want to either come into them for themselves over the summer or want to rent them out at much higher nightly rental costs.
Which is, fair enough for the landlords, but it does mean that places to live on Waiheke depleted very rapidly.
It creates a level of inequity on the island.
It's now changing. Now the people who own those houses are not renting them during the winter. They don't want somebody in there. They don't need somebody in there, so they just lock the place up and they walk away. And that starts to create an imbalanced community.
We've noticed that the page of rentals in the Gulf News, for example, went down from a page to 1, or not even that.
We've always had that holiday influx, and so that's always been a problematic thing at this time of the year, but that's increased. It's very stressful, particularly at this time of year, because there's nothing available, and there's actually no storage available either. So if you're a sole parent, that's another problem, and you've got children, then you've got that added stress of worrying about having a roof over your head.
We've had families living in cars, we've had families living in caravans on people's friends' properties.
It's a real urgent issue for employers on the island, especially the summer ones.
The businesses that depend on a year-round complete community find they're in a boom-bust cycle.
There's no doubt that on Waiheke these days there's a boom and bust economy again,
And they can't hire the people because those people have been kicked out of their rentals by the people who own those homes and come for the high season.
You've got an entire summer staff that actually can't afford to house themselves. In fact, they can't find anywhere to house themselves.
We've been losing young families, older people.
We're losing people from the island, and then who's going to be the cleaners and all those sort of jobs that traditionally were, met by people with a lower income. That they just won't be there.
Affordable housing is going away. It's going away because Waiheke is a very, very attractive place to live.
We're a very desirable tourist destination. Also, we've become desirable to those with wealth who can afford to buy here, so they've bought up and taken all sorts of housing out of the community.
We've had the whole gentrification of Waiheke, so Waiheke is now a place to come to buy property and do it up, so it's forcing up rents.
And what we're seeing this year is, worse than any other year. If a family or a household is spending over 40% of their total weekly income on their accommodation costs, then they are sliding towards being in financial difficulty / poverty, depending on what word you want to use for it. Now we're seeing 50, 60, sometimes 70% of people's income going on rents on Waiheke, and that's crazy. That means that life is essentially untenable.
I hear the stories from people what's happening in terms of the stress and the difficulties that they encounter when their housing is taken away for whatever reason. It's summer, the rents are going up to maximise their rental potential over the summer months, or because the house is put on the market. They're trying to make more money, of course.
So, you've got basic human self-interest, which is understandable, and out go the tenants.
So you could easily find yourself given a 4 weeks notice and then camping in a van for the rest of the summer.
What I'm first seeing now is people having to move off the island because their rents are increasing, they can't find any alternative accommodation, and they can't get any additional support or income support to address the increasing rent.
You've got power, you've got phone, you've got kids, you've got food, and food goes first. And that's why our food bank is under such high demand.
I see a lot of people who have all of those stresses mounting up over time, so there's communication problems, there's alcohol and drug abuse.
The stability of people at the bottom of the scale as families is almost impossible to achieve.
It's total week to week, hand to mouth, scrambling. What should we pay? What's most urgent? What's going to get cut off? Okay, we'll put $20 on this, we'll put $30 on that, and next week we'll see what we've got.
These people are in a position where either they have to move off the island because they can no longer afford to live here and they can't deal with the stress of having to move constantly, or they get into a cycle of having to move every 6 months to a year, which, as I said, presents a lot of difficulties.
High rents cast, many people into what I would absolutely call poverty. Poverty is an emotive word, but it exists. It's here on our island, and it's relentless and it's demoralising. It's a struggle, and it grinds down even the most resilient people over time.
This is it's gruesome, and I don't think it's overstating it.
The solutions that we're looking for are going to have to be quite varied. There are as many solutions as there are people willing to give of their time and space and land and energies.
If we can get some affordable rents happening on the island, we'll avoid this scarcity problem that we have that enables the landlords to just charge more and more and more. And so it may well have the added benefit of keeping general rents reasonable as well.
Social housing would mitigate the supply-demand mismatch. It would mean that there'd be more houses available at that low-cost end of the scale. So that would bring down the prices of the private rental market, because they wouldn't be able to charge crazy amounts knowing that there'll be someone out there who'll take the place.
The rates of occupancy of community housing are extremely high, 99%. 1% of properties might be empty at any one time. So it's obviously it's a system that works and that meets people's needs.
There's a number of ways in which, and places on the island, where affordable housing can be constructed.
There is definitely some land, council-owned land, that we think would be appropriate for some community housing. Personally, I'm a bit nervous about grouping all the low-cost housing together. I think you risk ghettoising people. I think it's much better to have a really diverse community distributed throughout all the residential areas.
There's a tiny house idea, the e-house idea, subdividing, having a movable, portable cabin.
Little small, sustainable cottages, sometimes on wheels, sometimes not.
Shipping container houses, cheap, flexible, and then mobile as well, transferable. So if something's not working in a certain place, it can be moved.
There's very little row housing, there's very little town housing, there's very little any sort of higher density housing, except for maybe the retirement apartments. That idea can easily work for other age groups. You could build an equivalent for young people with families, and you would design it slightly differently, but there is absolutely no reason why you couldn't do something like that.
We could look at rent to buy, we could look at retrofitting, we can look at subsidising rents. Landlords could come on board and say, yes, if there's a rent subsidy, then we can give this person a fixed term lease for 5 years. That sort of, there are lots of different exciting options. The community may decide to set up a housing trust. People can donate to. We would fundraise, apply for grants from places like lotteries and ASB Community Trust. Queenstown had exactly this issue, that it's a playground for the rich, and the people who actually keep the community running can't afford to live there. So it's quite well established, the Queenstown Lakes District Community Trust, and I think that we'll be able to use a lot of their experience. Part of me is annoyed at the government for stepping aside from providing low-cost housing, but it also enables communities to take it up for themselves. you know, and to create what you actually need in your own community is really exciting.
Central government has decided to get out of provision of social housing, and that opens up the way for community, for it to come back into community control.
This has to be community driven, and communities don't make profits out of these. They're doing it for other reasons.
We have so many able, talented people on Waiheke who can make this happen.
We have got the expertise on the island. We've certainly got the tradespeople on the island. We've got architects, we've got planners. Our resources are limitless, I think.
Waiheke is such an innovative place with a number of very well-resourced people amongst us, and a number of very effective people amongst us, sort of globally in some ways.
There's plenty of energy on the island for this project.
The council needs to reform the rules so that it's much easier to get things done. We need to have the council empower our community, our local board, to make decisions because they experience the effect of those decisions.
To me, accommodation in a house and a home is at the heart of well-being, physical, mental, emotional.
Everybody deserves to have a standard of living that's healthy and, you know, encourages well-being.
And under those circumstances, children thrive and communities thrive, and that can't happen when one child out of two has moved house before they're two.